The imperial mode of living is a concept I introduced with my colleague Markusom Wiissenom some years ago, and we want to understand how the economic and political processes of globalization, of commodity production, of power struggles are also inscribed in the everyday life of people. So if we have a cell phone, if we eat meat which is produced elsewhere, if we have clothes, it is not only the enterprises that offer it, but it has something to do with us. So we want a cell phone, we want cheap clothes, and this means imperial, that we refer in our everyday life to cheap labor and cheap nature from elsewhere. And even if we work, and if we go to a factory or to an office and we use their materials, they are also often produced elsewhere. So imperial means that we extend our actions to other spaces, to other people in the world. This is the imperial mode of living beside the mode of production. It's not replacing the mode of production, it's part of the mode of production. I would start today in the current conjuncture, given that we have so cynical wealth, so powerful people who also try to convert their wealth into political power, that we need high taxes on wealth, high taxes on high incomes, but also on the assets. It's not only to fence the power of these people, but it's also to contribute to the financing of the public expenditures of the health system, of the educational system here at the university. So how the universities are financed. So we need this move, this historical move, which we already had 100 years ago, in the mid of the 20th century, when many states said after the Second World War, now we need the money to reconstruct our societies, our economies, and this we will do with high taxes of the wealthy. And this pertained during some decades until the 1970s in the western part, in the capitalist part of the world. And I think one crucial first step and initiative is to tax the rich and also to make politics credible. Because for many people today, politics is an experience of austerity. So I have to contribute with my small income, with my small living standard. I have to contribute to the stabilization of the economy, and the rich don't do anything. And this needs to be changed. I think a current myth since 20 years is that we can modernize our economies ecologically. It's called ecological modernization, without tackling with the power relations, with the growth model which sustains our economy. So ecological modernization means, okay, we will decarbonize our societies, our economies, which is important enough. Yeah, it's very, very important. But we don't question power relations. We don't question wealth. We don't question the imperative of growth. But we know from so many studies that even the societies need to decarbonize. Each growth unit is referring to more resources and to more energy. So the first and the strongest myth, I would say, is that sustainability can be achieved without changing the structures of society, or in my words, without changing the imperial mode of production and living. I think that young people are, of course, heterogeneous, yeah? But I would say in the political discourses, the climate crisis is often reduced to a phenomenon which is described with natural sciences. This is also the case, but what we need is also an understanding of the root causes, of the societal root causes of climate crisis. And this is, of course, the burning of fossil fuels, it's methane, it's others, but this has even deeper root causes. And I come back to my argument before, this has to do with a mode of living, a mode of production, which is power-shaped, interests are behind, and others. So we need to open up the minds of the young people that it's not enough to decarbonize the society and the economy, to have more renewable energy, which is important enough, but also to question the power relations underneath.